National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children.
Rescue, defend, shelter, support. Why change?
How many times do you turn on the TV and you see a story about a child being raped or a child being killed and you turn the channel? Or you're looking at the newspaper and you just can't read it and you turn the page. Well, these children can't turn the channel, they can't turn the page because these children live this each and every day.
You think we got troubles now? If we don't address the problem and save those children and educate those children, yeah, we're in trouble.
You couldn't just see as a human that these children living in these situations weren't okay, and that these kids were going to end up like their parents if we didn't do something to prevent it and stop it.
We could do a lot of education, a lot of marketing for drug-endangered children, a lot of just awareness.
When law enforcement goes to a house and there's children there, or there are children involved, can we change their life, the trajectory of that child? And we can.
So if we don't provide children opportunities to do this when they're kids, they'll become adolescents and they'll act out and they'll become adults. And that trauma and that grief and loss and chronic stress and fear will come back and trip them up.
We saw a cycle starting to form where methamphetamine users were having children who were quickly affected by methamphetamine use. And then we saw those children growing up and having their own children. So we decided we had to break the cycle.
So we can either deal with that young and hopefully make the family safe, or we can wait till later when it could be a really negative thing for a young adult. We are benefiting these kids in a long-term way that will make it so that we don't repeat next generation. We don't have these same kids becoming the drug addicts we're dealing with in 15 years when they have their first child as a teenager.
Early intervention gives children such a chance to change their lives, to build their strengths, to deepen their resiliency.
But we have to look at that child and decide, what is that child's life worth?
And if we don't take the initiative to protect these children, who's going to do it?
The DEC approach.
If I could describe the DEC efforts in one word, I don't think I could pick one word.
If I had to describe it in one word, for me personally, I'd say rewarding.
The children benefit from better services, better care, better awareness, and educated individuals handling their situation.
Invigorating and refreshing, and it's brought a positive spin to how we do things.
DEC has been really instrumental as far as getting people to start talking and coming together with a catalyst of our safe and happy children.
The joy to see in a child's eye when they're reunified with a parent who's been able to avail themselves of a multitude of services, and now the child can go home.
Well, I think the DEC approach has changed a lot of the working relationships.
It's by taking a multidisciplinary approach, we're not just looking at the problem, we're looking at the bigger picture.
For the professional, it makes your work easier, more efficient. It makes for better casework, better testimony.
We can come together for a common goal under DEC.
It allows us to put down those barriers to come together for one common cause, which is the child.
It's allowed for communication and trust to develop across systems, which is critical in serving the families.
A big difference is obviously the effect that drugs have had on the families who come into the child welfare system.
To see a child smile because they're not going to go into the foster care system, but rather they're going to go with a relative or their other parent because we've been able to collaborate early enough on.
And it still really comes down to people choosing to work together, people choosing to trust one another, people choosing to share their resources, their power, their funding.
And it's when we work in unison that that little hand gets grabbed, not by one hand, but by multiple hands. And that child is lifted up and hugged and surrounded by people who truly believe only in the best interests of that little boy and that little girl.
There's a personal case that I was aware of. The last time I saw the 9-year-old, when we kicked the door on his parents' house, he was leaned up in the position on the wall. I know he went into Child Protective Services custody. That young man right now is an agent for our Bureau. We made that change in his life. So we can do the same for other children, but we've got to think outside that box. We've been raised as law enforcement but think inside up.
I think we need to consider the multitude of disciplines, how we can work collaboratively together.
The first and foremost thing that we do is we get the child out of the situation they're in and into a safe environment, because we know it's safe because we've done our homework. That's the difference that DEC has made in my county.
Early intervention is key. It's like anything else. Somebody that gets cancer, who has the best chance? Do we wait until it's stage 3 and when we begin aggressive treatment? Let's start right at the beginning.
If we can change the trajectory of that child's life, they won't be next year's client.
Open the doors. We all have things to teach each other. How can we come together on behalf of children? That's the key.
The DEC approach can change the life of a child forever.
National Alliance for Drug Endangered Children.
Rescue, defend, shelter, support.
5 miles north of Denver, Colorado is a small suburban property. The neighborhood is serene with an elementary school right next door. This was once the home to 4 generations of the Hansen family.
When we started getting in a lot of trouble was when my great-grandmother died. I never lived away from my great-grandmother my whole entire life. Either right next door or in her house I lived. So when she died, everything kind of started falling fast.
From the outside, nothing seemed unusual about this location, but from the inside, the Hansen family were hiding a dark secret, a secret that law enforcement officers were about to expose.
September 24th, 2001, detectives obtain a search warrant and head to the Hansens' compound.
My house got raided, I believe, like 5, maybe 6 times. So I think that was the 3rd time. There was 2 other previous times before that, but that was the 3rd time. The 3rd time they raided my house, and I definitely was manufacturing methamphetamine at the time.
Nearly 20 people were arrested for running meth labs in each of the 4 houses on the property. Hazmat crews were brought in, and the news media descended on the location.
The North Metro Drug Task Force, along with the help of 3 different SWAT teams and numerous hazmat crews, has raided several houses here in Adams County. The place is a virtual compound.
Task Force officers processed the crime scene for more than 12 hours and discovered Erin Hansen's other secret. Her 8-year-old son, Alex, was living in the middle of the entire operation. Alex, now age 16, recalls the task force raid on the compound.
In the raid in 2001, I kind of felt scared. I guess I can't really remember some of my past, but what I can remember of it, I was pretty scared, crying.
Alex was at my mom's house because we were cooking at my house, and Alex, I would never have him in the house. I mean, if the chemicals were in the house, that was one thing, but if something was going on, he was not in the house. He was down at my mom's house, but there was chemicals in her house too. And at the time when you're in that, you don't think that that's wrong, it's just normal.
Although arrested at age 26 for meth, Erin began abusing drugs when she was just 12 years old, starting with marijuana.
I stopped smoking pot by the time I was 15, and I just did acid until I was 16, and then I started doing heroin when I was 16, and I was strung out on heroin from the time I was 16 until I was 26 or 27 when I went to prison.
Heroin was part of Erin's life long before she became a user herself. Her father went to prison for selling the drug, and her mother was a daily user. Erin recalls growing up with her mother's addiction.
I just wanted my mom to be awake, or she would leave with my dad, and then they would come home, and instead of like spending time with me after being gone all day, they'd go straight to the bathroom and get high and then come out all nodded out, and then I really didn't have my mom then either. So I remember I just wanted her to be awake.
370 miles away in Salt Lake City, Utah, another woman began using drugs to mask the pain of her own sexual abuse.
I remember the first time that I smoked marijuana, the numbing feeling that it gave me, and how all of a sudden I couldn't feel any pain. And actually I was feeling something that was euphoric and enjoyable, which was something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. I started dating someone who turned out to be a methamphetamine dealer, and he introduced me to meth. And I started using the drug. The first time I used the drug, all the pain of what was going on at home, all the pain that I had suffered, all the work that I had yet to complete, I mean, this numbed it all out. And I didn't feel happy, I didn't feel sad, I just didn't feel anything at all. And except for the euphoric feeling that the drug gives you. But emotionally, there was nothing there anymore.
By age 21, Robin was battling a 3-year addiction to methamphetamine. To make matters worse, she was also living on the streets along with her infant son, Taryn.
It's hard for me to think back on those times because there are times when I wonder, I wasn't eating, so I can't always remember if Taryn ate. And he never complained, he never cried. He was just such a good little boy. And I wonder if now, as I know more about the addiction and I actually work with addicts, if he wasn't just scared, too scared, and didn't feel safe, that he could express what was really going on.
Two families living hundreds of miles away from each other, each devastated by the impacts of illicit drug abuse. A type of devastation most deeply felt by the innocent children living in these situations.
I don't think a kid should ever have to go through a parent with drugs. I just think that's the worst thing ever, for a kid to have to go through that.
Children go through developmental stages. When you have infants who have been neglected, when they cry and no one comes, when they're hungry and they don't get fed, when they need attention and they don't get picked up. This is a child that grows up not knowing how to love or trust.
These young children are growing up in homes where not normal parenting is occurring because of the parental substance abuse problems, and that puts them at risk for lifelong problems in learning how to get along with other people and learning how to trust other adults.
I think the ability to take care of an infant's hard enough, even if you're not stoned, you know. I mean, I amaze myself every day about how I'm able to raise kids, you know, and be blessed with kids, and then people who are making those type of decisions, and getting stoned or drunk in front of their kids or using any sort of drugs like that, putting them in danger. I don't think it's hard enough to be a parent without even having that kind of stuff on board, so.
The discovery of a drug-endangered child is an important first step, which usually happens with a law enforcement raid or Child Protective Services investigation. This is the moment of crisis intervention, but sadly, many drug-endangered children efforts do little more than coordinate this type of response.
The crisis intervention, it plays a significant role. I mean, it's opportunities for us to get into a house, to see the families, to see the living conditions. But if we stop just with that moment, if we're just saying, okay, this is a drug bust, this is a meth lab, this is a marijuana grow, if we're just stopping there and not recognizing all of the things that are occurring in this child's life 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when we're not there, we're missing those opportunities, because the crisis intervention is going to last that day. And what's going to happen for the rest of their life is when we've actually connected with social services, when we've connected with the school, when we've connected with treatment providers, when we've connected with the community, to start saying, this is your role.
The long-term needs of these children and family are often complex and require a much more comprehensive strategy.
Any victim of child abuse goes hand in hand with addiction, and so a lot of these
kids that I work with and their families also struggle with addiction and domestic violence and financial instability and all of these different things that make it a complex case.
Well, certainly any child that's involved in a family or a community where drug abuse is going on is affected by it, both in their the stability of their homes, in the ability of the parents to oversee their care and their health, and the actual exposure to the drugs themselves. So I think it's a huge concern and something that everyone really needs to pay attention to.
The beauty of childhood innocence, playing in the park and using imaginations to create make-believe games are a daily occurrence. A child's life is shaped by their surroundings and their perceptions of right and wrong. Drug-endangered children are shaped by the illicit drug activity that has been brought into their lives. Children are a blank canvas, and unfortunately, the pictures painted on them are not always pretty. Children will mirror mom and dad. Once they have been exposed to drug-using parents, their caretaker roles often become reversed. The beauty of childhood innocence takes on a much darker tone for drug-endangered children.
You know, there's a case that we had that actually highlighted all of these points, that, you know, you're not going to have the broken bones, you're not going to have, you know, the visible injuries, the bruises. And we had started working with social services by this point. We were realizing that law enforcement was missing the connection between drugs plus children equals risk. And so in this particular case, we actually called social services, and they let us know that there were going to be 2 children at this house, that they'd already had open cases with them, that this was something that they've been dealing with ongoing, but that the children were placed with mom. And this happened to be where we were investigating manufacturing methamphetamine that involved mom. So we get on scene. We decided to go there early in the morning so that we could hopefully catch everybody at the house. And the SWAT team is getting ready to do entry into the house, and one of the detectives who was on the front door literally gets on the radio and says, "Stop, stop, stop, don't send the SWAT team in. There's a little one coming out the front door." So everybody freezes. We've already debriefed this. We know there's children in the house, and the little one comes out the front door, and you can hear the detective on the radio saying, "It must be the 4-year-old, it's a little one. He's in a skeleton outfit." And, you know, it's to the point where he almost glows in the dark because it's so dark in the morning. And so he says he's looking to the right, he's looking to the left, and he went back in the house. So we're all talking about this, like, what is this 4-year-old doing coming out onto his front porch so early in the morning? And as we're talking about it, he comes back out again. And he looks to the right, and he looks to the left, and he goes back in the house. So, of course, we're detectives undercover, and they immediately think, oh, you know, we've been compromised. He knows we're here. He's counter surveillance. They've taught a 4-year-old how to do counter surveillance. And so we go ahead and send SWAT team in. We tell them they've probably been compromised. The 4-year-old's up. So when they go in and get him, they find him and an 8-year-old cousin of his.
What's your name? Romeo? Oh, yeah? What's your name? Amber? Amber Renee.
I say to him, Romeo, it's killing me. What are you doing at, 6 o'clock in the morning, coming out of your front door, looking up and down your street? And he says, oh, today's my Halloween costume party. And he points to his costume. And he says, and I really, really, really want to go. But I can't wake my mom up, and I don't know where the bus stop is. So I thought if I just put my costume on, I could get up in the morning and I could just watch up and down the street, and I could catch the buses that drove by. During our conversation, he actually says to me, I know why you're here. And I'm like, really, why am I here? Well, you're here because my mom makes oil. So to kind of validate what he was saying, and meth labs look like manufacturing oil, I said, we are here because your mom makes oil. And he's like, ha, it's not oil, it's drugs. So you have a 4-year-old that can't count to 7, but he can tell us that his mom makes oil because that's what she's told him. And in reality, it's meth, and he even says it's drugs. Then he says, I can draw you a picture. We're like, really? My mind is thinking, you can't count to 7, but you can draw me a picture of a meth lab and manufacturing methamphetamine? So we give him a pen and paper, and he starts drawing the picture. So, you know, as us and investigators, we're sitting here going, this kid is 4 years old, can't count to 7, can draw an entire meth lab. Sorry, but I didn't see a bruise, I didn't see a broken bone, I didn't see a cracked skull. I didn't see anything that would indicate that this is child abuse or neglect that's taking place. But the story tells me that this is child abuse and neglect taking place, that living in this home is not only risky because of manufacturing methamphetamine, it's risky because of the day in, day out activities that are occurring in his life, that he can't count to 7, but he can draw a meth lab.
A drug-endangered child has been discovered and his parent has been arrested. So what happens next? For Alex, he was placed in the care of his cousin while his mother was in jail, a situation that improved his safety but proved traumatic in other ways.
When the 2000 raid, after I got taken away from my mom, I lived with Carla, my cousin. And during that time, she wouldn't let me talk to her or see her or whatever. And after a while, I kind of just got sick, started like not wanting to eat, just getting really depressed. And one day I was walking through the kitchen and she was like, Alex, you need to eat right now. And I was like, no, I can't eat. And I just puked all over the fridge and it was bad. And then after that, I kind of got over it, you know, once I started like getting to know people. And after, before that, after that, I just kind of started to forget everything, because forgetting was a lot easier than remembering. Because if I forgot about it, I didn't care. It was just like, I don't know this memory anymore, so I can't get hurt about it, you know?
Like Alex, Taryn was also placed with family members while his mother was in and out of jail or drug treatment facilities.
I was alone in the treatment. I had no support whatsoever. They would have family groups. Mine was the only family that wasn't there. They would do family one-on-one sessions. My family never came. On visiting days, I would sit in my room and do assignments and journal and pray. And finally, when I was in there for 2 months, Jan Fredrickson, my counselor, said, why don't we call and just see if your family is willing to come and just tell them about your progress. She made a phone call to my dad, and my dad says, yeah, we'll come. We'll be there in a couple days. So my dad and Kathy came up, and they were very distant, very scared. I know now that they were scared. At the time, I thought they hated me, but they were terrified because they didn't know if this was for real. And so they were very distant, and they did a counseling session with me, and I remember my stepmom breaking down and saying, I said, I don't think Taryn remembers me or knows who I am anymore. And she says, you don't know the half of it. This little boy prays for you every night. He stares out the window and watches for you. And we have to pull him away and explain to him that you're not coming. He is not ours. He is yours. And he wants to be with you. And so we had already thought we were never going to give him back to you. But we're afraid we're going to do more damage if we don't.
We talk about adverse childhood events in a kid's life and what impacts them. So if we don't collaborate and do this together, we're missing the loss in this child's life. The fact that their mom or dad are so high on drugs that they've lost parenting, that they've lost medical care, that they've lost connectedness with siblings, that they become parentified. And you don't find that out in a crisis intervention. You find that out when you dig deeper and figure out what services this family's going to need past today.
One of the challenges we have here in Utah is we have a fairly well-populated Wasatch Front area and a lot of services, and then we have a lot of frontier and rural communities. And the thing that I'm very proud about is that our Fostering Healthy Children program is statewide and really reaches out and serves the communities regardless of how far they are from our major population area. And that goes along with the clinical services that we offer through the Children with Special Health Care Needs, the child developmental clinics that we offer in 9 different satellite clinics, to which again those children can be referred to for evaluation, as well as 15 sites for early intervention throughout the state of Utah. So despite our geographic challenges, I think that we're doing an impressive job to reach out to those rural communities.
You know, there's actually some of the bigger jurisdictions nationwide, and
I think there's 2 in Colorado, where they are trying to do a family drug court, which it combines the DNN cases that are involving that involve drugs, the use of drugs, which led to the neglect or abuse of the children, with the criminal aspect of it. And it's in the experimental stage, so I don't know how effective that is. But I think it would be, if I would like to try it here. I don't know if we have the funding, of course, that's always a huge issue. But to me, these parents, whether they're in DNN court or they're in felony court, for them to be able, you have to address the whole picture. You have to address their addiction. They don't know how to parent. You know, you have to address it as a family unit.
In Salt Lake City, officers Derek Christensen and Sean Smart are assigned to an elite law enforcement team.
This one has a closed occupancy sign on it too.
Today's assignment is to work with Child Protective Services on a drug-endangered children investigation.
Jessica, Detective Christensen. Hey, we're heading over there if you want to meet us over there.
Ashley Lancaster and Jessica Winslow are caseworkers with Utah's Child Protective Services. Today, they want to check the welfare of an infant who's living with parents suspected of illicit drug use.
So I just need to meet with her. We've been here 4 times. It sounds like people are home. We can hear them. They just won't open the door because they know why we're here.
All right,
so
well, let's give it a shot then.
The officers and workers meet to discuss the background of the case and form a plan to make contact with the mother.
Hello, how you doing?
How are you? Do you remember me?
Yeah, she doesn't live here anymore, actually.
All right, well, we're here to speak with you and your husband now.
Okay.
Can we come on in? All right.
Immediately, the odor of heavy marijuana smoke is detected. The infant is found and the mother appears under the influence of drugs. The caseworkers complete a safety plan for the family while the officers address the illicit drug activities in the home. These are some of the elements of a successful collaboration. Real collaboration requires service providers to do much more than simply show up at the same place. Sadly, many communities experience a much different situation.
Yeah, and I have mixed feelings about that, quite frankly.
Joyce Christensen has more than 20 years' experience in Child Protective Services with Garfield County, Colorado. Her view of working with law enforcement officers on child maltreatment investigations is much more about conflict than collaboration.
And I think that if law enforcement comes in not as stormtroopers, you know, I've done that too, where, you know, they kick the door in and there we are, but that there is a family issue, and that we're here to look at that and see how your kids are and what we can do to help you deal with that issue.
Breaking down the conflicts and barriers between service providers is one of the core principles of the Drug Endangered Children efforts.